Good morning. We're back for another edition of the Astro Weather, and it is me, your Astro Weatherman, Robert Phoenix, and we're here to look at the astrological influences for the day. And we're getting ready to cycle out of a couple of things here, right? We're getting ready to cycle out of Taurus, and Gemini is on the horizon. Jupiter is about to change signs. Mercury's gone direct, and we're staring down at Mars ingress into Leo. So the week ahead is full of change with the luminaries. And I use the word luminaries as it relates to planets, even though it's mostly reserved for stars, but we're going to call the planets luminaries. Why not? All right, let's take a look at the chart as it is here in the hill country. We'll just use Austin as an anchor. We got Gemini rising at 8 a.m. this morning. The sun is separating further out from Uranus, which we talked a little bit about last night. I'm sorry, on Sunday night, and getting some reasonable distance here at 6 degrees. And we have a nice sextile between the sun and Neptune. Why don't we start there? Anytime you get sextiles or trines to Neptune, there tends to be a more congenial air in the air, right? There's a bit more leeway, a bit more latitude, a bit more compassion, a bit more empathy. We're a little bit less on our guard. And, for a world that has been consistently traumatized really since 2001. Let's just throw 2001 in there. 9/11, 2001, and clearly since 3/11/2020, it's a lot. It's a lot for people to handle. So when we have these sextiles, especially with the sun or trine with the sun to Neptune, the energy tends to be a bit more forgiving and a bit more, again, congenial. It's kind of like, go ahead, I'll let you in the lane, right? You go ahead, I'll let you in the lane, even though you're being an asshole and you're trying to force your way in the lane. I don't care, because the sun is sextiling Neptune today. I'm in a forgiving mood. I have empathy for your struggle to maintain some level of control under duress, and I think it's a good place to start today. And as the sun moves through the final degrees of Taurus, especially at 26 and 27, that sextile becomes a little bit tighter. And, I like to talk about save face moments when they're appropriate. This is one of those times. And your physical needs and your spiritual needs are more in harmony. And somebody would say, well, isn't it all spiritual? And I'd say yes, but we're breaking it down a little bit here. Your physical needs are definitely connected to what you put in your body, your ability to feel more safe and secure, especially under the sign of Taurus. And there generally tends to be kind of a greater sense of grace when we have this Sun Neptune sextile. There's some other tension and stress in today's chart, which we will talk about, but this is not one of them. So we have about a 3-day run here. And I could, even in chat this morning, I could sense the good feelings, the good vibes. And it's always good to take note of that. And, what can you do with these transits? Like, they're transitory. You could have experiences when planets are in transit that can be very meaningful. And those experiences can be processed and embedded in who you are, right? So the transits are really important because they give us an opportunity to understand life lessons and learn from them and embody them, right? So yeah, they're out there for everybody right now. Everybody has the opportunity to kind of experience this simultaneously. What else do we have? We have Pluto right there on the button, again at 0 Aquarius, retrograding. And it's I think from a collective perspective, I hate the word collective, from a social perspective, I think we're going to see a lot of backlash with this Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. So for instance, we know what happened with Bud Light, and they went in on their campaign when Pluto went into Aquarius. Sports Illustrated just published an issue where the person on the cover is not the sex that they were born with. And with Pluto retrograde, I think we're going to see a major backlash, more of a major backlash against the promotion of this synthetic biology that is really a part of, part of Pluto and Aquarius is about what we're witnessing. And I don't want to get into a long dissertation about it, but it reminds me of the opening scene of the movie AI by Steven Spielberg, originally slated to be in the hands of Stanley Kubrick. And at the beginning of the movie, people are destroying these robots because they've realized that the robots have become problematic, that they can do things better than they can do, that it's upended the social economy, and there's this almost kind of redneck Southern Baptist feel to the destruction of these robots. And I think we're kind of on the precipice of something like that. Not that we're going to destroy quote unquote trans people, but it feels a lot like that scene, that opening scene in AI. And the stand-ins for the robots in AI are the people who are being promoted as genetically modified humans, because that's really what they are. They're genetically modified humans. And they're genetically modified from their hormonal base and also from the surgical base. So when we have Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, it feels like there's this reaction, which is very retrogradian, right? There's this reaction. Mercury is all the way back to 5 degrees, and it's in square with Pluto. Now Mercury's moving forward, and it's in Taurus. And of course, what are we accentuating and leaning into when Mercury's in Taurus? It's physical things. It's physical matter. And of course, there's going to be a square with Pluto. And of course, there's going to be a larger rejection of synthetic values or synthetic biology. And this is really going to be the new, this is the new front for humanity. It's not going to go away anytime soon. I think there was a guy from Google who has been on the front lines and creating things like Chat GPT, who just resigned from Google. And he said, we've let the cat out of the bag. And this guy is terrified. And what's really interesting is that it gets it. I was on a show yesterday with Olga Perez, and if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link over on Twitter, and maybe I'll throw it up on Facebook. And one of the things that I talked about is George Soros and I don't want to get into who George Soros is. That's part of the show. But if you go back in time and look at his interview on 60 Minutes, George Soros talks about how he turned in other Jews to the Nazis. And, his mentality really was that, well, if I don't do it, somebody else will, right? If I don't take the 40 pieces of silver, somebody else will. And that's exactly what this guy from Google said. When he was basically confessing his sins for being Dr. Frankenstein, he said it. He's like, well, if I don't do it, somebody else will. Somebody else will get the research dollars. Somebody else will be able to pay their mortgage and buy a second and third home. Somebody else will be able to take their fill in the blank on a vacation to the Virgin Islands or wherever, Maldives. And from a research standpoint, and this is, again, we're kind of in this Pluto, Mercury Pluto square. It's like, the sacrifices that people make in order to get what they want or need. And they look around and for instance, the Chinese will have no problem with AI. They'll have no problem with artificial or synthetic biology. No problem at all. They don't have the same kinds of moral dilemmas that the West has in a lot of ways. They're not tied or anchored to that. So if the Chinese are allowed to, this is the new arms race. AI is the new arms race. Synthetic biology is the new arms race. So if the Chinese are the ones that are moving forward, then everybody else has to, because guess what? If other countries or Other independent groups don't do it. Somebody else will. And this is all about capture the flag. So with this Mercury Pluto square, we're really dealing with values, right? We're dealing with our material values in a lot of ways. And that goes right down to your money. You know, again, the whole question is, where's your money? What's it doing? Where is it going? And it's all part of this Mercury Pluto square. So there is some degree of kind of mental energy that is being expressed. You know, we're the hearts. I mean, these are fixed squares too, right? It's a fixed square. So when we look around and we see things like, well, what's happening at the border, or if you're in Europe, you've got your own version of it and have had it for a while now. You know, the whole idea is, well, what do we do? You know, because Mercury and Taurus wants practical and pragmatic instructions, maps, plans, blueprints, and these are very difficult questions to ask. It's almost like, you know, how do you put a fire out in a house that's you know, almost a quarter of the way burnt down to the ground, right? Or maybe even more than that. Those are difficult questions. Sometimes you just got to get out of the house. Now Mercury does have a nice sextile to Venus today, so it's good to be able to talk about these things. So if we put the Mercury Pluto square together with the Mercury Venus sextile, it's good to talk about things that trouble you, or things that are feel like they're insurmountable. And you'll find allies with the Mercury Venus sextile. You'll find people that are sympathetic, and you might be the sympathetic ear on the other end. So I think this is one of those days where we can kind of air out the blanket in some ways. Now, does it give us a map moving forward? No, because we're at this weird crisis point where we don't want to be stuck like a deer in the headlights, because we see all these paralytic things happening in the world around us, but we also don't want to be overreactive at the same time. So the Mercury Venus sextile can be quite good. And if you achieve some degree of balance and empathy and being heard and listened to, you could take some of the edge off the Mercury Pluto square. And if you put 2 or 3 heads together, you might come up with some interesting solutions. You may not be able to change the world, but you can have some good conversations. And at the end of the day, you'll realize that you're on the same page more than less with other people. Mars is at 27 Cancer, so it's getting to that weird degree, right? Well, those weird degrees, the 27th and 28th degrees of a sign is when the energy goes wacky, right? So, you know, my evolution of a transit and into an ingress is the following. So when a planet gets to 27 degrees, 28 degrees, the energy gets really staticky and hard to handle. And it almost is a mirror of like a star that goes into a supernova mode. And then when it hits 29, it goes dark. There's nothing left. And so out of that darkness, out of the black hole of the 29th degree, a new sign is born, right? And it kind of follows this celestial pattern. And I've noticed that the 27th and particularly the 28th degree of a sign is when the energy is really, really wonky. So this falls right in alignment with today and tomorrow with the Mars-Jupiter square. And we get into those squares with Jupiter, everything becomes bigger. And Jupiter is right at the edge of 29 degrees. You know, Jupiter theoretically has no more power as well. Like this big burst of Aries energy. You know, when I see this, I kind of look at, you know, the global picture, and I look at like what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, and whatever's going on in that part of the world, because I don't think we really truly know. If it is a war theater that seems to be the one that is somewhere between the midpoint of what's being portrayed and what's not being portrayed, this Mars square Jupiter is tricky. It's really tricky in that situation, and things could go full tilt boogie. And we're at those final degrees where Mars in Cancer is like really hyper protective, super hyper protective. And again, in these last 2 degrees, the energy is kind of all over the place. So again, from a personal standpoint, there's some things to work out here. And I don't think that the energies are unreasonable. I love the Sun Neptune sextile. I love the Mercury sextile to Venus. So there are some remedies, and I think the remedy is that if you look around and you see that the world is in chaos and in turmoil, which it is in a lot of ways, that there also is the potential for understanding the underlying pattern of things, and putting your trust in, for lack of a better term, a higher power, because there are just certain things that are above our pay grade. There are just certain things that we're not going to be able, or maybe we could, I don't know, maybe if we all pulled together 500,000 people and focused our energy on Ukraine and Russia, we might be able to change something. That's a possibility. I'm not ruling that out at all. But unless we're doing that, right, it becomes much more personal. So these are personal energies when you have the Mercury sextile to Venus. And if there is less harmony in the world and more discord in the world, certainly on a personal level, you may be able to remedy that. And there's a lot of that, even like with, for instance, Mercury sextiling Saturn. Like a lot of today is Mercury dependent, very Mercury dependent. And so you get to, work through your fears, you take action when needed, have meaningful conversations, be pragmatic. This is a very pragmatic day. Mercury's just going to continue to move forward and move into a tighter sextile with Saturn tomorrow. These are very pragmatic energies. They're not overly mystical. They're not overly like synchromistic, but they're practical. So you can do practical things in order to remedy like the much larger and bigger questions that kind of loom over all of us. And I think in a time of chaos and turmoil, which clearly I believe at a social level we're in, doing everyday things in order to keep your world connected, it's very important, very important. So if you have certain rituals or certain things that you do throughout the day, whether it's spend time, a little bit of time in nature, connect with your garden, connect with your body, connect with a friend, like that normalcy, I think is really important. So I would say lean into the normalcy in as much as you can. The moon is in a really interesting position because it's not really doing anything except, what do we have? We've got a, is that a quintile? I still have morning eyes. So let me zoom in. I have morning sight. Hold on. You guys know morning vision, don't you? Yeah, that's a square. We've got a square with Mercury, which is kind of interesting, right? That the moon would be squaring Mercury. Oh, Venus, my bad. Venus. Yeah, of course it's squaring Venus, but it's moving away from that square. It's 7 degrees. So by the time we move into the latter part of the day, no matter where you are in the world, the moon is moving out of that square. So we're moving into some really interesting territory with the moon today. And it's in Aries. And what does the moon in Aries want? It wants it right now, like instant gratification. I don't know. I think the square to Venus is interesting. There's a little bit of passion and sizzle. Venus in Cancer, pretty conservative. One of those Venuses that can delay some gratification. But the moon in Aries is like, no, I want it right now. Right. So there is, at least in the early part of the day, kind of an urgency. And especially when it comes to dealing with things that are domestic, and there's like, oh, I got to get this done. I got to get this done. I got to get this done. And don't stress out too much if you don't accomplish what you have on the table today. And that a lot of it gets back also to, the emerging Mars Mercury square. And as Mars moves into Leo, that square is going to become more prominent. We talked about this on Sunday night, where we're going to have this Mars Pluto opposition, which I think is very intense. And I don't want to be a doomsayer, but it's very intense when you get into a fixed Mars Pluto opposition, especially Mars and Leo, and egos are involved. And it's like, well, this is the right way. This is my way. There's a lot of self-righteous indignation, and almost, does it coincide with the report that just came out, the Durham report? There's a lot of I told you so coming. A lot of I told you so. That said, Mars is in a sextile again. A lot of sextiles today. It's in a sextile with the sun, and sextiles are openings, right? You get to practice the energy. So there's a lot of opening energy today. You get to practice things. Like, you get to move into it. What if? And we still have this Mars Neptune trine, which, again, I really like Mars Neptune trines. They're creative, they're imaginative. So there's some really interesting relief in the stars or in the luminaries. There's also some interesting dynamic tension. And it's a lot like life. Today is a lot like life. Life will give you these challenges and these struggles, and you get to bump up against them, but it also gives you the opportunity for release, letting go, exploring new possibilities, new potential. So I would say today in the Astro Weather today it's a lot like life, right? It's a lot like life. Highs and lows, ins and outs. You'll experience some good things today, maybe some challenges, right? And that's what it is. That's how it is here. And if you look at the planets, they're really located in, what is this? When you look at the planets, you can see that they're all in personal signs, with the exception of Neptune, Saturn, and Pluto. They're all personal signs. So they're all, again, that's a lot like life. It's like personal meaning and value. Okay, let's get into the star of the day. Well, whose birthday is today? Very interesting day for birthdays, by the way. Today's Liberace's birthday. Lee. Who else's birthday? Edgar Bronfman Jr. Okay. I remember when Edgar Bronfman Jr. first came to my attention. I used to watch him on like CNN, Larry King, and he's the son of the Edgar Bronfman Sr. And of course, the Bronfmans made their fortune as bootleggers from Canada. They were bringing in Canadian whiskey, and one of the main drop-off points for the Bronfmans was old Joe Kennedy in Boston, right? He wasn't the only one, but there's a scene, by the way, in The Untouchables where they raid this train early on in the movie because Canadian whiskey is coming into the country because they have these distillers in Canada. So that's how the Bronfmans, really made their fortune. A lot of people made a lot of money during Prohibition. It was like Prohibition helped a lot of families that were willing to, if I don't do it, somebody else will kind of moment. Like the Kennedys' family fortune was built on Prohibition and the relationship with all these other mobsters and money people, right? But I remember seeing Edgar Bronfman for the first time and listening to him. And then eventually he wound up buying this company that I used to work for. And this is part of the whole Seagram's thing. And I thought to myself, and I'm just going to be flat out here and use very plain language. This is a dumb motherfucker, right? I was like, there were certain times when you could just tell people are smart. And I'm looking at Edgar Bronfman. I'm like, this guy was born on third base. And he might be money smart, but it was like, wow, really? This guy runs a company? He runs this company? Anyway, that's just a little aside. Megan Fox's birthday today. Edgar Bronfman Jr., Liberace. I think there was somebody else that was kind of interesting, but there is nobody more interesting than our star of the day. because his star is bright and burning, and that is Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson is on a roll, man. Right? He's got a weird chart too. He's got a really, really weird chart. Tucker has what we call a seesaw chart, right? Like he has all these planets down here at the bottom of this chart. Fifth house, hobbies, children, right? Third house, communication, siblings, heavy. You can see why Tucker's successful. He's got this Pluto Jupiter conjunction in the third house. And, you know, when I look at these planets, they're in this retrograde position. He's got the South Node in Virgo. So he has some responsibility with the South Node there. I mean, I could see where Tucker could change. Everybody says, oh, he's just CFR or count, you know, or he's fill in the blank, right? But with those retrograde planets, I would think that he'd have to alter his position around what he's communicating at times in his life. It's just the nature of it. And Neptune is opposing those planets. And Neptune is also on his true node. So I would think that Tucker is having a bit of a spiritual awakening. I'm gonna go on record with that. And you know, Neptune dissolves things. And I think with his true node in the ninth house, especially in Pisces, he's got a higher purpose. And you know, we all are born into whatever conditions we're born into. You know, Tucker Carlson was certainly born into privilege. He's another guy that's born on third base, just like Edgar Bronfman. But unlike Edgar Bronfman, Tucker's not dumb. Tucker has Mercury and Gemini. He's fucking smart, right? You cannot be not smart with Mercury and Gemini. Tucker's challenge with Mercury is typical of the seesaw chart, is that, you know, he's got the public life way up here above the horizon. He's got the private life. And in that regard, he's going to have oppositions. So he has Mars in Sagittarius, which is really ideological. And you can see where Tucker has this dynamic with the opposition. And I do think that with Mars and Sagittarius, if he has the right alignment, the right philosophical alignment with that Mars, Tucker can be a force. And Mars and Sagittarius must probe forward and move into deeper territories of truth, right? Mercury and Gemini sometimes can get caught up in triviality. And, you know, this is bow tie Tucker. And then over here, this is Tucker fired from Fox. Now that's going to make a very deep imprint. Like, I don't think Tucker was sitting around the table and, you know, high-fiving the Murdochs and smoking cigars when it happened. Like, boy, we really got over on these people. I think that was real. And again, I was on the record that, you know, this is about Dominion, and he was really part of the Dominion deal. And I said that very early on, and that's true, right? So the dynamic dance between Mars and Mercury is really interesting in this chart, that he has to remake his Mercury over time, because Mars and Sagittarius demands it. It demands that Tucker move forward in the spirit of truth and understanding what, you know, to the best of his ability, what truth is. And so we have Neptune on his true node, and there's, you know, the veils are kind of dissolving. And I do believe that Tucker has the possibility of understanding that his role is a much more spiritual one in a lot of ways. And the true node in the ninth house is ruled by Sagittarius. So he has to tell the truth. It is incumbent upon him. And also in Pisces, right, there is it's more, in a lot of ways, Pisces is faded. You know, Pisces is not a sign that is known for direct action. It's more about what happens to it. It's more about sort of the breath of spirit, pneuma, that's, you know, breathed into the aspect with Pisces, for better or worse. It could be, you know, it could be a mouse spirit, right? It could be like a Sirocco or a Santa Ana wind. And I know I'm using air metaphors, but we have to talk about air with spirit. What's interesting about Saturn here is that, you know, Tucker's going through this Saturn 8th house transit, which is so important to anybody. And you encounter death along the way with a Saturn 8th house transit. You have to let go of things, right? But you find the one thing that is immutable with that Saturn transit. It's like the shaman's journey to the underworld, and you're shown the gift. And Tucker has been on this journey, right? It's really fascinating to see this. And when Saturn emerges in his 9th house, there's going to be a much more serious commitment, I think, in a lot of ways. And also, I'm not sure if he understands on some level the burden of the responsibility with Saturn moving into his 9th house. Well, it's very serious. And by the time it gets to the end of that transit, it's going to be conjuncting his true node. And that's kind of a serious transit. And a lot of people have talked about Tucker Carlson running for president. I don't think that's going to happen. He's not going to throw his hat into the ring in 2024. But if for some reason we're still around here and we're still playing this election game, 2028 would be a period where I think Tucker Carlson would consider running for president if we still have this model. And where I'm seeing it's tenuous at best. He's going to have Uranus on his sun more next year than this year, but he's going to get some of that conjunction. And that's a brand new start, right? That's radical. It's technological. He's got right now Jupiter conjuncting his Saturn. And I would not be surprised if, Tucker's next move or next platform isn't revealed over the course of the next, week to 10 days with this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Jupiter is all about opportunity. And he's got Saturn in the 10th house. So he's been incredibly successful in a lot, but I actually think he's going to be more successful. And he's staring the next opportunity right in his face. Transiting true node is going to be on his Saturn. Like if he were my client, I'm like, dude, you're about to pull the lever and hit cherries or 777. So you better put as many, dollars in, right? You hit those maxes and you get, maximum payout. Like this is maximum payout time for Tucker Carlson. But it's not anything that's moved by finances. He doesn't need the money. To me, it's more about the Neptune conjunction with the true node in his chart. And what I think would be the scales falling away. So, and I know a lot about Tucker Carlson. Trust me, I do. But I feel like this is the image of a chart where so much is happening that this guy is in deep change. And no matter what his background, breeding, associations, ties with other people, I think there's too much going on in his chart for him to sort of be that baked in the cake character. And I'm not normally this sort of positive and optimistic about public figures, but when I see what's going on in his chart, it's like, this is big. This is somebody who has kind of reached this, I wouldn't say a zenith, but very close to a zenith moment. He's got all these people who watch him on TV, and it's about to get quantified. Totally quantified, or not even quantified. You will use the word quantified. Like he's poised to kind of go next level, not only in his broadcast world or his role as a journalist, but as a human being. Like if this was a client, I'd be incredibly excited about their chart. Yeah, there's some inherent challenges. Sure. Absolutely. But the biggest challenge is, the Pluto Saturn square, I think, is probably the biggest challenge in his chart. And I think that's where, even Pluto in the 7th house, coming to radical ruptures, agreements and disagreements with contracts. In the Pluto Saturn square, clearly is pissing off the status quo. Right? Saturn is the status quo. And you get into those Pluto Saturn squares, and they're very powerful, especially in a fixed sign. But with Jupiter here, it's kind of like he doesn't care. He's going to roll the dice. So He's not going away. This guy's not going away. He's not going to capitulate. I think in a lot of ways, I'll go on the record here, and I know he's got a family, he's got kids, and he's got a life, but in a lot of ways, Tucker's life and purpose is really just about to begin. It'll be interesting to see what happens, for sure. Yeah, there you go. Start of the day. My overly optimistic view of Tucker Carlson in his chart. And with that, that's the end of Astro Weather, boys and girls. Please join me over at 15 Minutes of Flame. Boy, we got a lot to talk about today. Lot to talk about today. When we don't meet for a few days, it's sort of like there's a lot of buildup. We got to unclog the pipes. So please join me over in 15 Minutes of Flame, 9:11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Join the greatest chat group on the internet, the Great Chataria. And I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Jasper and Peachy, and we'll break it all down. Now, if you want to meet your day with a little more of a sense of calm, healing, nature is one of our best friends and one of the best natural sources for being calm and healing your mind, body, and spirit is, of course, guess what? Hemp, CBD. And I have to give out a shout out to our sponsor, my good buddy Chris over at True Hemp Science. And if you're looking for CBD products to integrate into your life, look no further. With all those wonderful personal organic placements in the chart today, a good time to blow in a call to Chris or make an appointment. Find out if CBD is right for you. Find out what CBD is right for you. And if it's right and you spend $100 or more, type in 15MINS. That's 15MINS. And guess what will happen? You'll get free product. It's always great getting free stuff. Right? It's like goodies. And people that have, a kind of a longer term relationship with Chris are always getting new things. It's like Christmas when you get the goodie bag that shows up. Spend $150 more, you get free shipping. And there's always a 30-day money back guarantee. This is old school business here with True Hemp Science. All right, I'm out of here. Thank you, everybody. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. Many blessings to each and every one of you. Stay strong, stay lean, stay limber, stay loose.